This will sound very strange, but a statue that was unveiled in Times Square in Manhattan in September of 2019, titled Rumors of War, a name taken from Jesus' Olivet Discourse when he said that there would be rumors of war at the beginning of the end times apocalypse period, and a major announcement that Pope Francis made exactly 6,666 days after the Y2K year 2000 computer scare at the turn of the millennium are prophecies that are pointing to the date that Israel will destroy, probably with nuclear bombs, Iran's nuclear energy and weapons facilities on December 17th, 2024. This event will then lead to Israel bombing with a nuclear bomb and completely destroying Damascus, Syria, and this might occur on June 8th, 2025. The post date for this video, the date that this video is posted, proves that these predictions are being made ahead of time, as do these time-stamped emails and forensic notes PDF documents. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. If you have already watched this essential introductory information, you can skip ahead 36 minutes. Do not skip ahead if you have watched similar introductory information in a video about Harris's predicted plane crash or any other prediction. This introductory information is different for each prediction, and the differences in the information is essential for each prediction. God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections is only being explained on this channel. The full intended meaning of God's prophetic signs cannot be properly understood without their context and connections to other prophetic signs. God's big picture of signs is an interconnected web. It is through these connections between related prophetic signs that God is telling very important stories that are revealing very important knowledge. For example, it is through God's big picture of signs, patterns, and connections that he is revealing the way in which Barack Obama will become the president again, which is through the death of Vice President Kamala Harris in a plane crash. For many years, God has been painting this particular picture through his prophetic signs, and along the way he has been developing numerous trails of connected signs that are leading to the precise date that Harris is predicted to die in a plane crash. Here is a diagram that illustrates one such example among countless examples. As we can see here, God has demonstrated a number of trails of signs that led to August 24th, 2023. It was known ahead of time that there would be a prophetic sign related to the death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash on August 24th. And then on this day, Vladimir Putin was the first public official to confirm that the Russian general and leader of the Wagner Group that attempted a coup of Vladimir Putin died in a plane crash, which hints at the soft coup that has been unfolding in America in recent years. In retrospect, it could have been easily predicted that the Russian general of the Wagner Group would die in a plane crash on August 24th, because it was known that August 24th is 54 days before October 17th, which was another date God was pointing to ahead of time. This is why on August 24th, Trump, God's trumpet, had in 5 months been arrested for the 4th time in the 4th state. It also hinted at the number 54. God has been using in his signs the theme of the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, the first black regiment to fight in the Civil War, who were known for fighting valiantly at Fort Wagner. As we can see in this diagram, The trail of signs continues on from August 24th to the date it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash on February 24th. This is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works. And this theme of the 54th Massachusetts Regiment is an example of a story that God is telling that is extremely important. Actually, February 24th ended up being another step in the trail of signs regarding the prediction for Kamala Harris's death in a plane crash that is leading to December 24th. The same is true for the prediction that Israel will bomb Iran's nuclear energy and weapons facilities. In this case, August 26, 2023, was an extremely important step in the trail of signs that is leading to the date that Israel is predicted to bomb Iran on December 17th. God developed many prophetic trails of signs that led to August 26, 2023, in order to communicate extremely important knowledge through the many different stories contained in these trails of prophetic signs. There are about 25 videos related to the prediction that Israel will bomb Iran and nuke Damascus, Syria on this channel that predict that Israel will bomb Iran on August 26th and nuke Damascus, Syria on September 4th, 2023. Each of these videos tell a different and very important story that everyone needs to know, and these stories are developed through trails of connected prophetic signs that led to August 26th, 2023, and September 4th, 2023. In other words, God's prophetic signs connected to August 26th, and then on August 26th, we received the prophetic signs that were expected in advance of August 26th. Likewise with September 4th. What I am saying is that when this prediction comes to pass, you should know that you need to watch every minute of every video on this channel, including all 25 of the videos that tell the different stories from God through different trails of prophetic signs that led to August 26th. What I am saying is that the 25 videos that predicted that Israel would bomb Iran on August 26th and nuke Damascus, Syria on September 4th are 100% correct. What I am saying is do not skip these videos that are predicting August 26th and September 4th. They must be watched. If you do not watch these videos and learn about the important stories God has been telling, you will have missed entirely the point of this prediction that is from God. Believe me, I know far better than you why God is giving this prediction, and it is so that you learn the information that is contained in these 25 other videos that predicted August 26th and September 4th. The analysis in this video explains how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections pointed to the date August 26th, 2023, and why it was believed that this would be the predicted date that Israel would bomb Iran's nuclear, energy, and weapons facilities. Since the time of the original production of this video, God's signs have revealed more knowledge, and instead of bombing Iran on August 26th, August 26th ended up being an important step in the trail of signs that is leading to the date that Israel will bomb Iran. It is now predicted that Israel will bomb Iran's nuclear, energy, and weapons facilities on December 17th, 2024. August 26th was the day that the host of the TV game show The Price is Right, Bob Barker, died at the age of 99, 9 days before September 4th. September 4th was the day of the prophetic Burning Man sign, the amazing details of which are explained in the must-watch Burning Man prophecy video. Every year at the end of the Burning Man festival, 70,000 quote-unquote burners leave en masse in what is called the Exodus. This year, the Exodus was a muddy disaster when the Playa Desert sand turned to mud due to unprecedented rain. The quote-unquote burners were trapped for days before they were finally allowed to begin the Exodus in the afternoon on Monday, a full day after most people typically leave the desert playa on the Sunday. The disastrous Burning Man Exodus is symbolism for an evacuation, and it is predicted that Israel will bomb Iran's Bushehr nuclear power plant and cause an evacuation in southwest Iran one day after it is predicted that a dirty bomb or suitcase nuke will be detonated in Manhattan, New York City, and cause an evacuation of Manhattan Island on December 16th. More is explained in the Burning Man video, but this is also why DJ Diplo and Chris Rock were part of this Burning Man news story, and why the video of them leaving Burning Man in the back of a pickup truck went viral. In his CNN interview, DJ Diplo mentioned Chris Rock's New York Knicks jacket that he was wearing as they were leaving Burning Man in the Exodus, which hinted at the coming Exodus evacuation in New York City. The prophetic Burning Man Exodus on September 4th, that was the result of sand turning to mud, was 9 days after Bob Barker died at the age of 99 on August 26th, and Barker is famous for his fight scene in a movie with Jewish comedian Adam Sandler, in which Sandler is thrown into water and is soaking wet, which hints at the sand turning to mud at Burning Man 9 days after Sandler's tribute tweet to Barker on the day he died at the age of 99. Barker rhymes with Bushehr, and the fight between Barker and the Jewish comedian hints at the fight between the Jewish nation Israel and Iran when Israel will bomb Iran's Bushehr nuclear power plant. Barker hosted the TV game show The Price is Right for a record 35 years, and Persia was renamed Iran in 1935. Roman, Greek, and Hebrew letters are also numbers, and as such, names and words can be converted into a numeric value. This is called gematria. The name Bob Barker in English gematria is equal to 444, and on the day that the host of The Price is Right died, news broke that the U.S. Marines are buying, for the right price, 44 of Israel's Iron Dome launchers. To confirm his prophetic signs, patterns, and connections, God frequently pairs the numbers 9, 23, and 44 together, as the number 9 is the most important number in God's end times warning signs, as from the Bible, the number 9 symbolizes God's judgment. The number 23 is the 9th prime number, and 2 divided by 3 equals 0.666, the number of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. This is why the Antichrist, the 44th president, became the president in 2009 and was the basketball president who wore jersey number 23 in high school. The name Bob Barker in gematria equals 444, and he died at the age of 99, and on the same day as the death of the host of the TV show The Price is Right, it was also reported that the U.S. Marines are buying for the right price 44 of Israel's Iron Dome launchers. Again, this is how God confirms his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel. He pairs the numbers 9 and 44 together, which serves as a second witness confirmation, which the Bible says is required. 99 days after Bob Barker died at the age of 99, and the sale of 44 of Israel's Iron Dome launchers, was the day that Iranian-backed Houthis launched missiles at an Israel-associated commercial ship named Number 9. This was on December 3rd, the same day that it was reported that Israel had moved beyond Gaza City and was for the first time operating its ground forces across the entire Gaza Strip region with its 2.3 million people population. 2.3 million people hints at 23, and this pairs with the number 9 ship on this same day. And this number 23 that is contained in the 2.3 million population pairs with the exact 99 days to the date that Bob Barker died at the age of 99, a pairing of 9 and 23. Again, to confirm his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, God pairs the numbers 9, 23, and 44 together, and from the day of the death at the age of 99 of the host of The Price is Right, Bob Barker, whose name hints at the Bashur nuclear power plant, and who died on the same day that 44 of Israel's Iron Dome launchers were sold for the right price. It is exactly 2 times 3 months to the relevant signs that occurred on February 26, 2024, and then from February 26th, it is exactly 2 plus 3 months to the date it is predicted that Israel will bomb Iran's Bashur nuclear power plant on July 26, 2024. 2 times 3 months and 2 plus 3 months pair with the 44 Iron Dome launchers and Barker's death at the age of 99. And this confirms the signs and connections. The relevant signs that occurred on February 26th, that were expected in advance of February 26th, were the Israeli Air Force announcement that it is creating a new Iran department. As well, on February 26th, the Palestinian Prime Minister announced his resignation. It is widely believed that his resignation is to make way for a new Palestinian government leading to a Palestinian state. There are 531 days in a prophetic blood moon lunar eclipse tetrad, and tetrads are associated with the restoration of the nation of Israel. Also, on February 26th, a member of the U.S. Air Force 531st Intelligence Support Squadron set himself on fire in front of the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C., in protest of the Israel-Gaza war. The fire is symbolic of Damascus being consumed in fire when Israel drops a nuclear bomb on it. Additionally, and perhaps most importantly, on February 26th, 2024, Jacob Rothschild, 4th Baron Rothschild, died. His great-uncle was Walter Rothschild, 2nd Baron Rothschild, to whom the U.S. government addressed the Balfour Declaration that declared that Palestine be a homeland for the Jewish people, thus paving the way for Jews to emigrate to Israel. The date February 26th hints at H226 in Strong's Hebrew Concordance, which is the word that means prophetic sign. The Rothschild family has a long history of being involved in Zionism and the restoration of Israel. We were expecting a prophetic sign on February 26th, and the date itself hints at prophetic sign, and we expected this prophetic sign to involve Israel, and this death of Jacob Rothschild, 4th Baron Rothschild, pointed to Walter Rothschild, 2nd Baron Rothschild. The 4th and 2nd Barons also hint at the number 42. And in Bible prophecy, the number 42 is symbolic of the period of the Antichrist, who will lead the world in attempting to divide Israel, God's land, which is why the Palestinian Prime Minister resigned on the same day that Jacob Rothschild died. And in the Bible, Jacob was renamed Israel. July 26th, 2024 ended up being another step in the trail of signs that is leading to the date it is predicted that Israel will bomb Iran. Prior to July 26th, it was recognized that it would be a step in the trail of signs that is leading to the date that Israel will bomb Iran. This event will not only be about Israel, but it is about the world ganging up on Israel in order to attempt to divide God's land. July 26th in 2024 was exactly 235 months after the Indonesia tsunami, or rather the Indian Ocean tsunami. 235 is the 77th semi-prime number, a number only divisible by two other prime numbers, the 77th prime number, and the tsunami on December 26th, 2004 was exactly 7 times 7 months before the Obama inauguration eclipse, which was 2 times 3 days after the inauguration of the basketball president who wore jersey 23 in high school. When I refer to what I mean by the Obama inauguration eclipse is that 6 days after his inauguration, there was a total solar eclipse that only went over Indonesia and no other country. And Barack Obama, the 44th president, grew up in Indonesia for 4 years. This connection to the Indian Ocean tsunami is extremely important, but I'm actually just taking this as a clip from another write-up, and this will have to be explained in another video. God uses firsts for his signs. The international sign we were expecting on July 26, 2024, regarding Israel and the world was the first ever Olympics opening ceremony outside of a stadium. The ceremony instead was held on the river that runs through Paris. The name of the river, Seine, hints at sin. Okay, I'll say that again. Seine hints at sin. This Olympics parade on the river is astounding because the day of the parade, July 26th, that's a typo, 2024, connects prophetically to the date of the peak of the once in 200 years flooding in downtown Paris from the Seine River. And that flooding included the flooding of the famous art museum, the Louvre. The peak of the flooding was June 3rd, 2016, the same date that world leaders met in France for the Middle East Peace Initiative conference to discuss what to do about Israel without Israel in attendance and with Israel officially condemning the talks. Okay? The same day of the peak of the flooding, the once in 200 disaster flooding, once in 200 years disastrous flooding, was the same day that the world leaders met in Paris, France for this blasphemous Antichrist talks without Israel and Israel officially condemning the talks. Muhammad Ali was a Muslim who was staunchly anti-Israel, and he was known for famous boxing matches that are associated with various locations around the world. I should say around the world. The number 1,656 is symbolic of the flood in the Bible, as the flood began 1,656 years after Adam. Ali died on the same day as the peak of the river flooding in downtown Paris. That was on the day of the world leaders' anti-Israel talks. Ali died on 6/3, which hints at 3 6s, which is the number that symbolizes the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. This was in 2016. That hints at 216, which is 6 times 6 times 6, and the Antichrist was born on the 216th day of the calendar year. And this talks and Ali's death was exactly 1,000, and the talks were again on the day of the flooding. And again, this number is associated with the flood. This flooding and talks sign and Ali's death was exactly 1,656 days before the first day that an American took the mark of the Antichrist on December 14th, 2020. Ali was also known for his conscientious objection to fighting in the Vietnam War. And God's purpose for the mark of the Antichrist is to test the faith of quote-unquote Christians who must conscientiously object to the mark of the Antichrist. The date of the opening ceremony in Paris, July 26th, hints at 726, and G726 in Strong's Greek Concordance, which is the word rapture, lowercase r. The number 714 hints at Revelation 7:14, the verse that symbolizes God's faithful who will be rescued and evacuated from the persecution from the Antichrist and the mark of the Antichrist, which is the rapture. The rapture is this event in Bible prophecy when God's faithful will be evacuated, rescued from the coming severe persecution from the Antichrist. Okay, so again, this date in itself hints at the rapture because of the date 726, hinting at G726, the word for rapture. And the number 714 also is symbolic of this rapture in Revelation 7:14. Okay, and God's faithful who will be rescued and evacuated from the persecution from the Antichrist and the mark of the Antichrist. The date of the peak of the flooding from the river in Paris, June 3rd, 2016, was 71,400 hours before the Paris Olympics opening ceremony on the river in Paris. The symbolic moment of Ali's conscientious objection to the Vietnam War was the meeting between Ali, 10 other celebrity athletes, and one politician. They met for the Cleveland Summit. Okay, so anyway, if you didn't catch that, I didn't reinforce it, emphasize it. This 71,400 hours is a hint at the verse in Revelation that symbolizes the rapture. Okay, because it's hinting at Revelation 7:14. And again, this 71,400 hours connects the date that symbolizes the rapture with these two events involving the river in Paris, the flooding and Ali's death on the day of the talks in Paris, and Ali was anti-Israel, and the day of the Paris Olympics on the river, the parade on the river, which involved the world. Okay, so the symbol, and so anyway, Ali's conscientious objection to the Vietnam War is symbolized by this Cleveland Summit. One story of the Olympic opening ceremony on the river was how LeBron James was the U.S. flag bearer. James is famous for playing for Cleveland, and James's story, and was furthermore born in Cleveland. And James's story with Cleveland was a major prophetic sign that identified the basketball president as the Antichrist. That's another story. Therefore, this 71,400 hours connection is confirmed through the Cleveland Summit, connecting to the famous player for Cleveland. In regards to the theme of the world in these signs, the World Trade Center towers collapsed on 9/11, 666 days before NASA launched its Opportunity probe to Mars, which was symbolism for the opportunity to repent after the 9/11 warning of judgment from God. In turn, Opportunity's launch, that's the opportunity for America to repent. In turn, Opportunity's launch on July 8th, 2003, was exactly 7 years, and this is symbolic of the period of the end and the Antichrist in Daniel chapter 9. before LeBron James's famous TV show special named The Decision, in which he announced his decision to leave Cleveland. In return, the decision, as in decision to not repent after the opportunity to repent, was exactly 9, and the number 9 is the most important number in God's big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel as from the Bible. It symbolizes God's judgment. This decision show was exactly 9 years before the prophetic flooding in Washington, D.C., the capital of the nation, at the Washington Monument, White House, and Pentagon. The flooding flooded the basement where the White House press corps has their offices, which was a sign against the press, the anti-conservative, anti-Trump press. And the flooding in the Pentagon was symbolic of many things. LeBron wears number 23, which pairs with this 9 years connection to point to Obama, because Obama also wore 23 in high school in basketball and was inaugurated in 2009. Furthermore, the mark of the Antichrist is the inverse of it, is described in the book of Ezekiel chapter 9, and the mark of the Antichrist changes a person's 23 chromosomes. The date, and that's also connected to Muhammad Ali because of the symbolism of conscientious objection. The date 726 hints at the word in the Greek concordance for rapture, and the people who will be raptured are mentioned in the book of Revelation in 7:14, which is why it is 71,400 hours in between the prophetic flooding on the river in Paris and the first ever Olympics parade on a river in Paris. In Revelation chapter 7, it is a symbolic 144,000 people, souls, who will be raptured, who are raptured in that chapter, and this symbolic number is derived from the 12 tribes of Israel. 144 is 12 times 12. This is why from July 26th, a date that hints at the evacuation of God's faithful in the rapture, it is 144 days to the date it is predicted that Israel will bomb Iran, which will cause an evacuation in Iran and lead to the world condemning Israel, as in the meeting of the talks in Paris condemning Israel, etc. This will be one day after it is predicted that a bomb will explode in Manhattan Island, which will cause an evacuation. Barker is known for his fight scene with the soaking wet Jewish comedian Adam Sandler, and Barker died at the age of 99, 9 days before the sand became wet and turned to mud during the Exodus evacuation in the desert at Burning Man, which is in turn 90 days before the Iranian-backed Houthis launched missiles at the Israeli number 9 ship on the same day that Israel began operating across the entirety of Gaza with its 2.3 million people. In simple English gematria, the name Iran is equal to 42, and the name Hamas is also equal to 42. 42 days after Barker died, and it was reported that the U.S. Marines are buying Israel's Iron Dome launchers, was the day that Israel's Iron Dome system was overwhelmed by Hamas rockets, at the same time that Hamas terrorists broke through the security fence and massacred people at a music festival in the Israeli desert, which is what was hinted at with the muddy disaster and Exodus evacuation in the desert at the Burning Man festival. The Exodus evacuation at Burning Man finally began at 2 p.m., 1400 military time on the Monday, and it was 1,400 Israelis that Hamas killed, most of whom were evacuating the music festival in the Israeli desert. Persia was renamed Iran in 1935. Bob Barker hosted the TV show The Price is Right for a record 35 years, and he is famous for his fight scene with Jewish comedian Adam Sandler, in which Sandler gets wet in a pool of water. And the 35th chapter of the book of Isaiah in the Bible is a prophecy about the parched land of the desert becoming a pool of water, and about a road that God's ransomed will travel on called Highway of Holiness. The burners in their exodus out of the parched land that had been turned to pools of water traveled down what is called Gate Road. And in the Bible, judgment on a people symbolically begins at the gate. Jesus said he is the gate, and the only way to evacuate and escape the coming destruction and death is through Jesus. In Hebrew gematria, the name Iran and the name Hamas are both equal to 130. In the Bible, ancient Persia is associated with the number 13, as Haman, a leader, a general in Persia, attempted to persecute the Jews and exterminate the Jews on the 2 13th days of the month. This is why it is predicted that Israel will bomb Iran 1 year and 3 months and 13 days after these signs on August 26, 2023. 1 year, 3 months, and 13 days hints at 2 13s, and again, Haman, a type for the Antichrist in the Bible, persecuted the Jews on the 2 13th days of the month. Furthermore, there are 2 antichrists who will lead the world in ganging up on Israel that are described in the book of Revelation in chapter 13. So that's also why the 2 13s here, 1 year, 3 months, and 13 days. This connects to the death of Bob Barker at the age of 99, and God pairs 9 and 13 for one reason being 9 times 13 is 117. The middle dividing chapter of the Bible is Psalms 117. The Antichrist is in Rome, and the Roman Empire divided its period of expansion with its period of contraction in the year 117 AD. The phrase, "let it divide," in the book of Genesis in Hebrew is equal to 117 in Hebrew gematria. The Antichrist is symbolized in the Bible by the number 13, and the number 9 symbolizes God's judgment. And the purpose of the Antichrist is to divide people into God's camp and the unfaithful, the apostates, the sheep from the goats, the wheat from the chaff. After the bomb explodes and there will be an evacuation in Manhattan or from Manhattan, this will be symbolic of the evacuation and rapture of God's faithful, a division between people. Likewise, when Israel will bomb Iran, there will be an evacuation into the desert. It will be a division, which is why from the prophetic signs, including the death of Bob Barker at the age of 99, it is 1 year and 3 months and 13 days, which gives us the number 13, which gives us 9 times 13 equals 117, which is symbolic of division. It was known since January that God was pointing to May 17th and May 20th regarding Israel bombing Iran and Damascus, Syria. And as will be explained in these videos, on May 17th we received the prophetic sign that was the vandalized tomb of Joseph in the northern West Bank territory. And on May 20th was the G7 summit in Hiroshima, Japan, the location that the first nuclear bomb was used in an act of war. And on May 20th was the surprise visit to the G7 summit in Hiroshima of the first Jewish president of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky, who at the beginning of the war with Russia had just turned 44 years old when Ukraine was made up of 44 million people. God is using Vladimir Zelensky as symbolism for the Antichrist, who is the 44th president. As described in Bible prophecy, the Jews in Jerusalem will flee Judea because of the 44th president Antichrist, similar to how there was an exodus of people from the nation that was 44 million, led by the first Jewish president at the age of 44. The surprise visit of the first Jewish president of Ukraine to the G7 summit at the location where the first nuclear bomb was dropped was 4 times 4 days after the 44-year-old leader of the 44 million nation made a surprise visit to the International Criminal Court, which was set up for the purpose of conducting court trials regarding war crimes. And after Israel will nuke Damascus, Syria, the world, led by the 44th president, will gang up on Israel and accuse it of war crimes. And as will be explained in these videos, Damascus, Syria is symbolized by the number 444. It is predicted that Israel will bomb, probably with nuclear bombs, Iran's nuclear energy and weapons facilities on August 26, 2023. This will be exactly 4 times 4 months after April 26, 2022. And although it isn't completely related to the subject of this video, on April 26, 2022, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris tweeted and announced that she had the CVD disease 44 days after the 44th president tweeted and announced that he had the CVD disease. The 44th president will become the president again through the predicted death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash on October 17, 2023. After this introduction to this video, the rest of this video will be an explanation for how God's signs, patterns, and connections pointed to the date April 26th in relation to the day that Israel will bomb, probably with nuclear bombs, Iran's nuclear energy and weapons facilities. It was known since 2021 that God was pointing to April 26th, and prior to April 26th, it was believed that this would be the date that Israel would bomb Iran. Instead, however, on this day, a big news story regarded the White House's statement that Iran's breakout time has been reduced from a year to weeks. The White House stated that it was very concerned about this. The breakout time refers to the amount of time it would take Iran to enrich enough uranium for a nuclear bomb. This was a new development regarding Iran's nuclear program, and it coincidentally occurred on April 26th, the date that was known ahead of time since 2021. This statement from the White House came after Secretary of State Anthony Blinken's testimony in a U.S. Senate hearing earlier in this day. He told Senate Foreign Relations Chairman Senator Bob Menendez that Iran's breakout time had been reduced from a year to weeks. This emphasis on weeks was a sign that God gave us that indicated that the day that Israel will nuke Iran is weeks away. But just how many weeks is the question. In the video titled Prediction Chernobyl Disaster equals Israel will nuke Iran on August 26th, it is explained the prophetic signs that occurred on April 26th, 2022, as well as many, many other prophetic signs in a trail of signs that is ultimately leading to August 26th, 2023. Therefore, arguably, this Chernobyl disaster prediction video is the most important video regarding these predictions regarding Israel bombing Iran and Damascus, Syria. Make sure you watch the prediction Chernobyl disaster video. Either pause this video here and come back to it, or watch the Chernobyl disaster video after watching this video. I will leave a link to the prediction Chernobyl disaster video in the description box below this video. From these prophetic signs on April 26th, these prophetic signs that relate to Israel and its conflict with Iran, these signs on April 26th are 390 days before May 20th, 2023. And the number of 390 days is extremely prophetic. As for one thing, it comes from the extremely prophetic prophecy in the book of Ezekiel in chapter 4, which regards God's timing regarding the nation of Israel. But also, the number 390 symbolizes the return of God, the return of Lord Jesus Christ to Jerusalem in Israel. God has clearly and repeatedly demonstrated this in his big picture of prophetic signs. And the reason why this is the case is that the 390th word in Strong's Greek New Testament Concordance is the word for return. The Apostle James used this word when he quoted Amos 9:11 from the Old Testament, which regards the Lord's return to rebuild his temple in Jerusalem. And as was stated, the bombing of Damascus will lead to the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem. And so it is astounding that we have this 390 days connection from the prophetic signs on April 26th to May 20th, the date it was predicted that Israel would nuke Damascus, Syria, but turned out to be 2 sets of 49 days, which hints at Jeremiah 49, before it is predicted that Israel will bomb Iran on August 26th. As well, one of the many reasons that May 20th was known ahead of time is that it is 4 times 4 days after May 4th, the date that the 44-year-old leader of the 44 million people nation made a surprise visit to the International Criminal Court. May 4th, 2023 was also a date that it was known ahead of time that God was pointing to. The International Criminal Court was set up for the purpose of conducting court trials for war crimes. And the reason why God pointed ahead of time to May 4th and the visit to the International Criminal Court of the 44-year-old leader of the nation of 44 million people is because after Israel will nuke Damascus, Syria, the world will condemn Israel for war crimes, and the world will be led by the Antichrist, the 44th president. And so from this surprise visit of the 44-year-old of the 44 million people nation to the International Criminal Court, it is 4 times 4 days to the date that the 44-year-old of the 44 million nation will make a surprise visit to the G7 summit in Hiroshima, the location in which the first nuclear bomb was used in an act of war. The bombing of Iran will lead to the nuking of Damascus, Syria, and as I will explain, Damascus is symbolized by the number 444. All right, as I mentioned, the rest of this video was recorded in or before April 26th, 2022. But I just wanted to begin this video by saying that this extremely important date right here, which I will explain more in a minute, this February 27th, 2019 date, which is 220 days after the 220 pounds rock fell from the Western Wall. This date right here is exactly 220 weeks to May 17th, the date it is predicted that Israel will bomb Iran. Actually, as was explained, May 17th, 2023 ended up being another step in the trail of signs leading to the date it is predicted that Israel will bomb Iran on August 26th, 2023. And we received a number of different prophetic signs on May 17th, including the Titanic sign, in which the 700,000 new images that created a 3-dimensional animated image of the Titanic never seen before, and included a close-up view of the propeller of the Titanic, on which the serial number is highlighted in the images and video, and that serial number is 101. And from May 17th, it is 101 days to August 26th. That said, what I was about to explain was known before May 17th, and that this date here, February 27th, 2019, is 220 weeks exactly to May 17th, the important step in the Trail of Signs. So hear me out. This is extremely profound, this exact 220 weeks connection. This here is the security wall. It's the wall of East Jerusalem. It's the wall that separates the West Bank from Jerusalem. It was built in the early 2000s after the terrorism on a daily basis. And anyway, there are more signs involving this security wall. This isn't the only one, and that's how God's big picture of signs works. It works on the principle of second and third witnesses confirming a matter. And for example, there are other prophetic signs involving this wall. But anyway, this was the day that a section of this security wall collapsed due to heavy rain, which is an act of God. And this was a big news story, and it is symbolism for the walls of security of Israel collapsing here. And that's what is involved with this bombing of Iran, and which will lead to more things, including the nuking of Damascus, as is predicted. But anyway, wait until you see what I have to say about these signs right here later in this video, and keep in mind, and it is astounding, and then keep in mind that this date here is exactly 220 weeks, which confirms this 220 days, which is these two sets of 110 days. Joshua died at the age of 110. He led the Hebrews around the walls of security before they collapsed in God's judgment. That's why it's 110 days to this collapse of the wall of security. And the reason why there were two towers on 9/11 that were 110 stories each that collapsed is it also hints at 220. And also the number 110, which I don't think I explain later, is symbolism for Jesus's first coming. He arrived officially in his triumphal entry on the 10th day of the first month, which hints at 110. And that's why 2 times 110 is symbolic of his second coming. I'm pretty sure I don't mention that. I know I don't mention that later in the video because that is a more recent understanding. And so keep that in mind as well. The reason why this is exactly 220 weeks and before this May 17th predicted date and 220 days back to this 220 pounds rock from the Western Wall is in fact that this number is also symbolic of the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ to Jerusalem in October 12th specifically, in 2024. And the prediction being made in this video will prove this. That is the purpose of this prediction. It is to prove, among other things, that the second coming is on October 12th, 2024, on the Day of Atonement. And make no mistake, that is the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction. All right, this sign right here, which I will explain in a minute in this video, this Petra flash flood, it's a major prophetic sign involving Israel. This date here is exactly 250 weeks to August 26th. And that is relevant because 250 weeks is the equivalent of 4,200 hours, and 7 times in Bible prophecy, the number 42, or 42 months, is a period of time in Bible prophecy that is associated with the rule, the timing, the period of the rule of the Antichrist. And in Revelation chapter 12, the Antichrist, the red dragon in Revelation chapter 12, chases the woman, which represents Jews in Judea, into the wilderness, into Petra, where they hide for the 42 months. And so that's why it's astounding that it's exactly 4,200 hours, which is the equivalent of 250 weeks. Now, this 4,200 hours is also the equivalent of 2,520,000 minutes. And that hints at 2,520. And that is like the 42 months, this period, a symbolic period regarding the end times and the Antichrist. So we have another second witness, another period that is symbolic of the Antichrist, connecting this Antichrist sign here on November 9th, 2018 to August 26th, 2023, the date it is predicted that war will begin and Israel will bomb Iran. Correction, the connection is 42,000 hours, not 4,200 hours. All right, this is a very important video. It's truly profound, truly. There is a lot of information and it's very amazing. And so I'm just going to get into it here. So much is contained in this video. Make sure you watch this video to the end. But let's begin here with this extremely profound event here, which was the decree to rebuild Jerusalem in the Israeli Knesset on April 1st, 1969. And this date here connects with 49 years exactly to this April 1st in 2018, which was Passover in the calendar that watches for new moons. And the extremely prophetic event, which was the collapse of the historic rock wall, stacked rock wall on Washington Street in Sonora, California. Now, what I'm going to do is play a clip from arguably one of the most important videos on this channel and is probably my personal favorite. And it was made a long time ago. It was made in the spring of 2019. And it explained the stunning parallel of signs, prophetic signs, with the timing of events in the book of Joshua. And it explains the importance of that and the importance of the book of Joshua and its relation to the book of Revelation, and on and on. If you're going to watch any videos on this channel at all, make sure you watch the Is Joshua the Key to Revelation video. That's currently the title of that video. I don't know if I'll change the title, but you need to watch that video, even though you'll watch a clip of it right now. You may also be able to recognize this video with this thumbnail that you see here, which says in it, Joshua parallel equals Yellowstone rapture, September 24th, 26th. It is because this trail of signs that the Joshua parallel is ultimately pointing to is the day that Yellowstone will erupt and the day of the resurrection rapture. But beyond those particular predictions, the video itself is filled with extremely important information. On April 1st, a wall collapsed on Washington Street in the old section of Sonora, California. Like the wall in Washington's Mount Vernon estate and the Jerusalem Security Wall, this wall fell due to unusually heavy rains. It was a historic building, and the collapse of the wall was a surprise to those involved because of the, quote, stacked rock style of construction, quote, that is, quote, known to date back to the days of the gold rush in the 1850s, quote. The quotes I mentioned are from an online news article on this story. With this rock wall, we have Jesus symbolism. As was explained in video number 3 of the Pentecost series, the rock that fell from the western wall on the 9th of Av symbolizes Jesus. Therefore, in this sign, we have more rock and wall symbolism, and therefore Jesus and national judgment symbolism. The number 333 symbolizes Jesus, and what confirms this analysis is that 333 days after this historic rock wall fell is the day the Jerusalem Security Wall fell on February 27th, which is another massive wall falling sign. The number 110 symbolizes Joshua, and the Jerusalem Security Wall falling sign connects with 110 days to Pentecost on June 16th, which is the end of the 2019 Joshua parallel, when the walls of Jericho fall. In other words, in the 2018 Joshua parallel, this rock wall sign that symbolizes Jesus and judgment connects with 333 days, a number that symbolizes Jesus, to the Jerusalem Security Wall falling judgment sign. The Jerusalem Security Wall falling sign, in turn, connects to the end of the 2019 Joshua parallel, with 110 days, a number that symbolizes Joshua and earthquake judgment. In other words, the 2018 Joshua parallel directly connects to the end of the 2019 Joshua parallel, with most profound Joshua walls falling and Jesus symbolism. And what is amazing beyond words is that on this Pentecost in 2019, the prophetic sign we received, one of many, was the rare 3.2 magnitude earthquake in a location named Jericho in Washington State next to the Columbia River. God uses the name Columbia to symbolize America as well. And when I first learned about this, because I was expecting such a sign in advance because of the Joshua parallel, I had to go for a long walk. For those that are unfamiliar with this story in the Bible, it is all about the walls of security falling on Jericho, the story in the book of Joshua. This earthquake in Jericho, Washington State will be explained more in a couple of minutes. In this diagram, we can see the connection I was just describing. 110 days symbolizes Joshua, this stacked rock wall sign on Passover in the calendar that watches for new moons, and Passover in the parallel with the timing of events in the book of Joshua, was 110 days before the historic and prophetic Jewish nation-state bill in the Israeli Knesset on July 19, 2018. July 19th was also the day of the prophetic duck boat tragedy, in which 17 people died, 9 of whom were from the same family. As was explained in prior videos, this was a judgment sign on America. A judgment sign that included Noah's flood symbolism, and the walls that fell in these wall-falling judgment signs were due to heavy rains. July 19th was in turn 333 days before June 16, 2019, Pentecost in the new moon calendar, and the end of the 2019 parallel with the book of Joshua. So, this is a second way in which the 2018 Joshua parallel directly connects to the end of the 2019 Joshua parallel. Using the very prophetic numbers of 110, which symbolizes Joshua and symbolizes Jesus, and 333, which also symbolizes Jesus as well. The date this historic stacked rock wall on Washington Street in California fell was the 49th anniversary of the decree to rebuild Jerusalem in 1969. And this wall's construction style dates back to the gold rush in 1849. The San Francisco 49ers football team name is derived from the gold rush in 1849. April 1st was the 49th anniversary of the decree to rebuild Jerusalem, and 49 years is 7 times 7 years. The decree to rebuild Jerusalem in 1969 came after 62 times 7 years from Suleiman the Magnificent's decree to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem in 1535. 62 times 7 years and 7 times 7 years are the lengths of time given by Archangel Gabriel in Daniel chapter 9 for the period of time until the arrival of the Messiah after a total of 69 times 7 years. In other words, the period of 69 times 7 years from Suleiman the Magnificent's decree to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem until April 1st, 2018, parallels the 69 times 7 years from the decree to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem recorded in the book of Nehemiah chapter 2 until the arrival of the Messiah. This parallel in itself is absolutely stunning. However, this parallel is also in the context of this other parallel of signs coinciding with the timing of events in the book of Joshua. In other words, the parallel of signs in 2018 we are studying here overlaps a parallel dating back to 1535 and Suleiman the Magnificent's decree to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, which in turn parallels the first coming of Jesus Christ, and the decree to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem in 445 BC. Think about this for a minute and let the magnitude of this sink in. This stacked rock wall on Washington Street is a massive sign that connects with the first coming of Jesus Christ. This stacked rock wall sign on April 1st, 2018, at the end of the parallel from Suleiman the Magnificent's decree to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, is signaling the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ. Jesus arrived after 69 times 7 years from the decree in the book of Nehemiah to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, and this stacked rock wall falling sign comes 69 times 7 years after Suleiman the Magnificent's decree to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. Brothers and sisters, I hope you are appreciating how significant this sign is. There certainly are no words to describe how amazing this is. This sign is even more beyond words astounding. The 24 Signs in February video explained the most massive second coming sign that was the unsealing of the Eastern Gate. If you haven't watched this video, I suggest watching it right away. Days of Temple Mount riots over the Golden Gate compound on the Temple Mount climaxed on February 22nd, or 2/22. It has been explained in prior videos how a series of twos symbolizes the end times. There are 22 chapters in the book of Revelation, and the last letter in the Hebrew alphabet is the Tav, and it is the 22nd letter. In Paleo-Hebrew, the Tav was a cross, and the Tav mark symbolizes Jesus. Jesus said he is the Alpha and the Omega, or rather the Aleph and the Tav. Brothers and sisters, it has occurred to me an even deeper reason why a series of twos symbolizes the end times. A series of twos symbolizes the second coming. The Aleph and the Tav symbolize the first and second comings. On February 22nd, the Israeli Moonlander probe was launched, and as the Israeli Moonlander video on this channel explained, this Israeli Moonlander was a massive second coming sign. This is a must-watch video, and it is the only place that explains the true purpose of this sign. On February 22nd, Arab Muslims crashed open the gate to the compound that is directly across the hall from the gate that Lord Jesus Christ will enter through in the second coming. The gate that Jesus will pass through was sealed with rock by Suleiman the Magnificent in 1535. Suleiman the Magnificent sealed this gate with a stacked rock wall. And this is the purpose of the prophetic sign of the stacked rock wall on Washington Street. The stacked rock wall that fell on April 1st, 2018 was 327 days before the unsealing of the Eastern Gate sign on February 22nd. G327 is the word for to seek out, search through, make diligent search. The Lord has used this number to encourage us in his signs before. This connection is such a deep and amazing confirmation. The historic stacked rock wall that fell exactly at the end of the 69 times 7 years from when Suleiman sealed the Eastern Gate came 327 days before the unsealing of the Eastern Gate sign. In other words, the crumbling of this historic stacked rock wall is symbolizing the unsealing of the Eastern Gate wall. In other words, this stacked rock wall sign truly is a second coming sign. And in other words, this is shocking, and our jaws are probably dropped at this point. It is also my opinion that the size of the wall that collapsed, the shape of it and the size of it on Washington Street is roughly the same size and shape of the sealed Eastern Gate. Also, the Lord is using the concept of parallel in itself as symbolism. He is using the 69 times 7 years parallel to point to this Joshua parallel we are studying in this video. The end of this 69 times 7 years parallel with Suleiman the Magnificent's decree and the decree in the Israeli Knesset in 1969 connects with this parallel with the book of Joshua. Many translations imprecisely translate the 62 and 7 sets of 7 as 62 weeks and 7 weeks in Daniel chapter 9. It just so happens that 62 weeks after this rock wall fell on the 49th anniversary of the decree to rebuild Jerusalem is Pentecost in the observed calendar on June 9th, which is 6/9 and can be seen as 69. It is amazing that the numbers 62 weeks and 69 weeks from Daniel chapter 9 are involved in this connection of 62 weeks between April 1st, 2018 and Pentecost this year on 6/9, which can be seen as 69. What is also amazing, though, is that April 1st, 2018 was the 49th anniversary of the decree in 1969. Adding further interest to this connection is that the 62 weeks and 7 weeks are described in Daniel chapter 9 to start from a decree to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, and April 1st, when the wall fell, was the 49th, or 7 times 7 years, anniversary of the decree in the Israeli Knesset to rebuild Jerusalem. If all of the numbers in the last couple of paragraphs were a little much, don't worry about it. George Washington was appointed to Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army in 1775. 1775 days prior to this historic wall falling on Washington Street in California was the day a bridge on Interstate 5 collapsed. The bridge spans the Skagit River and connects the city of Mount Vernon in Washington State. The bridge is known as the Mount Vernon Bridge. Prior videos have spoken about the massive sign that was the collapse of the retaining wall in Washington's Mount Vernon estate. Bridges are symbolic of Christ as the mediator between us and God. It was the Bay Bridge that symbolically collapsed in the 1989 World Series earthquake sign. I will be speaking more about the Mount Vernon Bridge, as well as other similar truly amazing national judgment signs in upcoming videos. This connection of 1775 days, from the day the stacked rock wall fell on Washington Street to the day the Interstate 5 Mount Vernon Bridge in Washington State collapsed, is truly astounding, and it is amazing confirmation of each of these signs. There was another amazing sign on April 1st. This stacked rock wall style of construction for this wall dates back to the California Gold Rush in 1849. The NFL football team in nearby San Francisco is named the 49ers, and the name is derived from this gold rush history. Pope Francis is the first beast Antichrist, and he took the name Francis, which is the same person the city of San Francisco is named after. On April 1st, we received a massive Antichrist sign. April 1st was Easter Sunday, and it was also April Fool's Day. April Fool's Day is a Catholic tradition, and because it fell on the same day as Easter, the Pope decided to use his power to cancel April Fool's Day in 2018 and instead have 2 April Fool's Days in 2019. Pope Francis used the power to change a date that a pope had not used in 400 to 500 years. This use of power to change the date points to verse 25 in Daniel chapter 7 that regards the Antichrist. He shall think to change the times and the law. What confirms this as a sign revealing the Pope is the first beast Antichrist is that 6,666 days before April 1st was New Year's Eve in 1999. This was the day of the Y2K Doomsday, which was all about the changing of the date. The day the Pope changed the date connects with 6,666 days to the doomsday that regarded changing a date. This is absolutely stunning. However, what now makes this even more stunning is that April 1st was also the day of the stacked rock wall that dates back to 1849, which connects to the 49ers football team that play in the city named after Francis, the same guy the Pope is named after. In summary, regarding this historic stacked rock wall that fell on Washington Street on April 1st, 2018, this was a stunning and very important sign that parallels events in the book of Joshua. Walls falling symbolize Joshua and judgment. All right, so in that clip that I just played that was made 3 years ago, I explained this 49 years connection. And again, this was the day of the wall that collapsed, and the number 110 symbolizes Joshua, which symbolizes walls of security collapsing in judgment. And again, as I said in the video, it was 110 days from this day to the day of this duck boat tragedy, and the day that the Israeli Knesset passed the Jewish state bill. Of course, that's relevant in this particular video because we are ultimately talking about the day that Israel will nuke Iran. So I will just play another clip now that was made a year ago regarding this particular duck boat tragedy. It's extremely important, and this clip will be extremely interesting. On June 15th, 2012, Nick Wallenda walked across Niagara Falls from Goat Island, which is Antichrist symbolism, to a location named Table Rock, which is symbolism for Christ because in the Bible, rock symbolizes Christ. Immediately following this walk, his family returned to their home in Missouri, which is right near the popular tourist destination Table Rock Lake. In July 2018, a duck boat sank on Table Rock Lake, killing 17 people, 9 of which were from the same family, which is amazing because 17 times 9 is 153, and Table Rock Lake has almost the exact same water volume and almost the exact same surface area as the Sea of Galilee in Israel, the location that Jesus' disciples caught 153 fish in their boat, which I believe was this exact first century boat that was discovered preserved in the mud at the shore of Capernaum in the Sea of Galilee. I just checked while in the middle of production of this video, and today, the date that I am producing this video, June 23rd, 2001, just happens to be coincidentally exactly 153 weeks after the duck boat tragedy in which 17 people died, 9 of which were from the same family. And 9 times 17 equals 153. What is also a coincidence is that I discovered this right after I posted this image of this boat in this video, and this is the only image that I use in videos that I personally photographed. I'm not sure what this means, but should I learn sometime after I've posted this video that a relevant sign occurred today, I will let you know in the description box below this video. If there is no relevant sign that occurs today, I will personally interpret this coincidence that can't be a coincidence as confirmation that the reason why I took this photo of this boat is because it is in fact the boat that Jesus and the disciples used on the Sea of Galilee. All right, as I just said, what you just heard was originally recorded on June 23rd, 2021, and today is July 29th, and in fact, we did receive the massive prophetic sign I just said to expect because it was exactly 153 weeks after the duck boat tragedy. This developed into an entire other thread and amazing video, and is explained in the must-watch World Series Blood Moon Prophecy video. It does not matter if one is a sports fan or not. It is very important God used sports signs, and it is also very interesting even if you aren't a baseball fan. And also, many other signs are involved in the explanation in this video, and many of them are not baseball or sports signs. From the Bible, the number 220 symbolizes rock, which symbolizes Jesus, because the 220th word in the Greek New Testament, Strong's G220, is the word for rooster, which symbolizes Peter, and Peter in Greek is Petros, which means rock, and Jesus gave Simon the name Peter after Peter had just stated the truth about who Jesus is, the Christ, which is why Jesus then said to his disciples that he would build his church on this rock, Petra, not Petros. Petra means bedrock. Petros means rock or stone. That he would build his church on this rock of truth that Peter had just stated, which is that Jesus is the Christ. Unfortunately, Catholics twist this one verse to imply that Jesus said he would build his church on Peter, a man, which is blasphemy, and thereby give popes, the supposed descendants from Peter, the authority to create all of their man-made traditions and doctrine on top of the Bible. The entire Catholic tradition hinges on this one verse, and this is why the Catholic tradition and system is satanic and not a legitimate denomination of Christianity. And Table Rock Lake has a maximum depth of 220 feet. The duck boat sank just before sunset and then was resurrected and raised from the bottom of 220-foot deep Table Rock Lake 3.5 days later in the early morning, just as Jesus was resurrected in the early morning 3.5 days after his crucifixion just before sunset. On the same early morning that the duck boat was resurrected from the bottom of Table Rock Lake, which has a maximum depth of 220 feet, and has the same dimensions as the lake in Israel, a 220-pound rock fell from the Temple Mount wall in Israel. The 220-pound stone fell from the Temple Mount wall on the date in the Hebrew calendar that commemorates the destruction of, coincidentally, both the first and second temples, and the second temple's stones fell on the Hebrew calendar date in 70 AD, shortly after the Jews rejected their Christ, just as Jesus predicted how these temples' stones would fall after his death and resurrection. This Hebrew calendar date on which both temples were destroyed is the 9th day of the month of Av. On this 9th day of Av in 2018, a record number of Jews ascended the Temple Mount complex. It was 1,440 Jews, and the 1,440th word in the Hebrew Old Testament in Strong's Concordance is the word for 70. These 1,440 Jews ascended the Temple Mount 70 days after the 70th anniversary of Israel's rebirth in 1948. And this 9th of Av in 2018 was 1948 years after the temple was destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD. This 220-pound stone fell and smashed the steps of the Gentile worship area. In the book of the prophet Daniel in the Bible, King Nebuchadnezzar has a dream regarding a statue that symbolizes the age of Gentile rulers over the world. At the end of the dream, the feet of the statue are smashed by a great rock that symbolizes Lord Jesus Christ at his second coming. This 220-pound stone that symbolizes Jesus and fell and smashed the steps of the Gentile worship area on the 9th of Av, symbolized the smashed feet of the statue in the dream. This 220-pound stone from the Temple Mount wall fell on the same day that the duck boat was raised from the bottom of 220 feet deep Table Rock Lake, which was 3 days after it sank. This 220-pound rock hints at verse 220 in the book of John. The Jews then said, "It has taken 46 years to build this temple, and you will raise it in 3 days?" Jesus had said to the Jews that when they destroy this temple, it will be raised in 3 days. He was referring to his crucifixion and resurrection 3 days later. All right, so I played a clip that explained this particular prophetic date here and the signs related to it. And I also played another clip involving a clip from another video involving the duck boat tragedy, which occurred 110 days after the wall collapsed, which is relevant because Joshua died at the age of 110. As explained in the clip, the number 110 symbolizes Joshua and walls of security collapsing in God's judgment. And again, this duck boat tragedy connected with 3.5 days to the Western Wall, rock that fell from the Western Wall, the day that the duck boat was raised. And so that is it's just stunning. It's just amazing. So in other words, this Western Wall sign connects with the Washington Wall sign, Washington Street Wall, which again is connecting with the decree to rebuild Jerusalem, which in turn connects with the decree to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, Suleiman the Magnificent, as I have explained. So, moving on from this date, as was explained, the duck boat was raised from the bottom of Table Rock Lake, which has a maximum depth of 220 feet, and it was raised on the same day that the 220-pound rock fell from the Western Wall. And I explained the prophetic significance of the number 220. Well, that is why it is astounding beyond words that from the day of the 220-pound rock that fell from the Western Wall and the day that the duck boat was raised from the bottom of Table Rock Lake, which has a maximum depth of 220 feet, it is 220 days to the day that the security wall collapsed in Jerusalem. And it collapsed again due to heavy rains, which is again why this wall collapsed on Washington Street. It also collapsed due to heavy rains, which is judgment. It's an act of God. Rain is an act of God. So it's judgment from God symbolism. This 220 days is actually broken into 2 sets of 110 days. It is 110 days from the day that the duck boat was raised to this day here. And by the way, the day before this day was the day that the 17 charges were laid on the captain of the duck boat. So it was there, and also that was the day of the Paradise Fire. But anyway, the day after was the day of the Petroflash flood, which is relevant because the duck boat tragedy is arguably a flood symbolism sign as well. The duck boats actually look like little Noah's arks. But this was a Petroflash flood. This was in Petra, Jordan. 4,000 tourists were evacuated at the sound of an alarm. And the news media stories talked about the 23 deaths and the last time that there was a flash flood. And in Petra, 23 is the number that symbolizes the Antichrist, the basketball president that wore jersey number 23. Barack Obama was in Petra, Jordan on the 23rd of the month, March 2013. But also, this Petroflash flood was exactly 400 weeks after the tsunami in Japan on March 11th, 2011. And that's obviously flood symbolism. And that connection of 400 weeks is relevant because For one thing, the number 400 symbolizes the Antichrist. Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, persecuted the Jews in Egypt for 400 years. That's why God uses 400. He also has connected it with Barack Obama signs, who went down to Egypt after he became elected. He went down to Egypt, gave his Cairo, Egypt speech in order to tell the Muslim world that America is no longer a Christian nation. He was compared with King Tut. He was said by the Egyptians to be the new King Tut of the world, which is relevant because he is the Antichrist of the world in the New World Order. And Isaiah chapter 31, which describes the Antichrist being defeated by the Messiah at the end of the chapter, begins with woe to those who go down to Egypt, which is what Barack Obama did after he became president. So that's the relevance of the 400 weeks. Now, this petroflash flood was 9 months and 23 days before the Hell's Gate Canyon flash flood, which is also an extreme prophetic Antichrist Barack Obama sign. It occurred in the same southwest region of Kenya where Barack Obama was born, and that's explained in other videos. And also 9 months and 23 days are extremely relevant. As I explain in other videos, God pairs the numbers 9 and 23 to reveal the identity of the Antichrist. Well, it just so happens also that Hell's Gate Canyon is directly south on the same longitudinal line as Petra, Jordan, which is amazing. The petroflash flood was also exactly 726 months after the biggest wave in history, the biggest tsunami, the tallest wave. Oh, by the way, 400 weeks, I forgot to mention, is also relevant because it is 40 weeks times 10, and 40 weeks is used in God's signs because when asked by his disciples for the signs of his return to look for, Jesus replied with the metaphor of birth pains. And according to the medical profession, the average human gestation is 40 weeks. He also used this metaphor of birth pains in context of earthquake signs. And the tsunami, which connects with 400 weeks to the petroflash flood, the Japan tsunami was caused due to a massive earthquake. I believe it was a 9.0 earthquake. And so that's why that's relevant as well. Also, that same day was a Barack Obama sign. That was the day that Barack Obama hosted the Chicago Blackhawks at the White House, and God has used these sports teams' visits to the White House as prophetic signs. This was the first of the Chicago teams. Barack Obama is from Chicago. God uses Chicago to point to Barack Obama, Chicago signs. This was the first of the Chicago teams that won their championship during Barack Obama's presidency. But the relevancy of that is further explained in other videos too. It was part of this 30-year cycle from when the Chicago Bears won the Super Bowl in 1985, the year that Obama moved to Chicago, to 2016, because the Super Bowl was played in 1986 in January, to 2016 when the Chicago Cubs won the extremely prophetic World Series, breaking the Chicago curse of the Billy Goat. Goat is Antichrist symbolism. They visited Obama 4 days before he left office and presented him with jersey number 44, completing the 30-year cycle. And in the Bible, 30 years symbolizes a king. Joseph and David were made kings at the age of 30 years old. And this 30-year cycle contained, in this 30-year cycle, all of the major sports teams in Chicago won their championships. And it was all about Barack Obama. But anyway, that was March 11th, 2011, when the Chicago Blackhawks visited the White House. And it is explained in other videos, but the Blackhawks is also symbolizing the upcoming catastrophic blackout that will be caused by the coming solar flare this September. Okay, so let's continue here. This petroflash flood connected with 110 days and 110 days to these prophetic walls of security signs. Oh yeah, the 726 months exactly. God uses the number 726 to symbolize G 726, which is the 726th word in Strong's Greek New Testament Concordance, which is the word for rapture. And this is extremely relevant because the petroflash flood was a Revelation chapter 12 sign. In Revelation chapter 12, it is said that the dragon will chase God's people, the Jews, out of Judea into the wilderness, and they will hide in the wilderness, and it is believed by myself and others that they will hide in Petra, Jordan. And in fact, this sign confirms this. That's also, by the way, why Obama visited Petra, Jordan when he was president, right after visiting Bethlehem. And so anyway, this description of the dragon chasing the Jews into the wilderness is followed with this dragon trying to drown the Jews in the wilderness with a flash flood, which is why this petroflash flood is a Revelation 12 sign. And these events in Revelation chapter 12 occur after the rapture, because the beginning of Revelation chapter 12 regards the signs that depict the rapture event. And what is stunning confirmation that this petroflash flood was a Revelation chapter 12 sign is that there were 12 deaths. Also, the number 12 symbolizes the church. And again, this Revelation chapter 12 sign is in context of Revelation chapter 12, which comes right after the part of Revelation 12, which is regarding the rapture of the church. And again, the number 726 symbolizes the rapture in God's big picture of signs. So that's why it's extremely relevant that this petroflash flood connects with exactly 726 months to, I believe it is May 9th or July 9th, 1958. It's on the 9th of the month and it's 1958. God uses 726 months connections, by the way, to connect signs from around this time period to more recent day signs. And this was the day of the biggest tsunami, the height of the wave, because it caused a rock slide. This tsunami, this earthquake, in Alaska, caused a rock slide, which created this biggest tsunami in this cove. I forget the name of it, Latoya Cove in Alaska, and produced this 1,700 feet wave that crashed up on the shore of the opposite side of the bay. And I described this more in detail in another video, the details of the prophetic details of it. It's amazing. So that's also more confirmation of the prophetic significance of the petroflash flood. Now let's move on and say that how this diagram works is this date here, February 27th, 2019, which, by the way, God pairs the numbers 9 and 110 together to confirm the signs and connections, and to point to 9/11. Now, if we think about it, this is how God would do it. This is how God would develop his true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming matters, which is what makes it true and not a product of one's imagination, and is what makes it different and unique from everything else on the internet. And if you think about it, this is how he would do it with second witnesses. He would pair certain numbers together. Obviously, it has to be certain numbers. And one of the numbers that he pairs together are 9 and 110. The number 9 is the most important number in his big picture of signs because from the Bible it symbolizes judgment. And I'll just take a couple of minutes to explain how God pairs numbers 9 and 110 together. In the book of Joshua in the Bible, Joshua died at the age of 110. Joshua led the Hebrews around the security walls of the ancient city of Jericho before they collapsed in judgment. On 9/11, the Twin Towers, which were 110 stories high, collapsed, engendering a small earthquake that cracked the foundation of Federal Hall, where George Washington was inaugurated, on Wall Street. President George Washington was a founding father, and his inauguration as the first president was a symbolic founding of the nation. The cracking of the foundation of Federal Hall on Wall Street on 9/11 symbolized America's foundation in God being cracked. This is because after Washington's inauguration at Federal Hall, he then walked down Wall Street to Trinity Chapel, where he consecrated the nation to God, saying that if the nation were to ever turn away from God, it would lose its blessings. After 9/11, Trinity Chapel was called the Miracle Chapel, as it was the only building at Ground Zero to have survived. It did not even suffer a broken window due to the 70-year-old sycamore tree that was uprooted as it sheltered the chapel from the falling debris. In commemoration of this sycamore tree outside the chapel, today there is a huge bronze statue of its roots. In other words, through the 9/11 events, God was pointing to Trinity Chapel and Washington's covenantal consecration of the nation to God at Trinity Chapel. Wall Street is named after the original 9-foot-high wall of security that the Dutch built to keep the British and the Indians out. The collapse of 110 floors that cracked the foundation of Federal Hall on Wall Street, which is named after a 9-foot-high security wall, hints at 9/11 and points to Joshua, who died at 110, and the Hebrews that marched around the walls of security before they collapsed in judgment. 110 floors and the 9-foot-high wall of security that was Wall Street points to George Washington's march down Wall Street to Trinity Chapel that symbolized a covenantal relationship between America and God. To this effect, Washington's march down Wall Street with the New York Stock Exchange, the building that symbolizes America's financial strength, located on one side of the street, and Federal Hall, the building that symbolizes America's governmental and institutional strength on the other side, also pointed to the cutting rights ritual practiced in ancient Israel that was used in Abraham's and God's ritual walk in their covenant that is described in Genesis 15. A covenant that symbolizes Washington's walk down Wall Street and his covenantal consecration of the nation to God at Trinity Chapel. There are only two nations in the history of the world that were founded not on ethnicity or territory or language, but were founded solely for God: Israel and America. In every daily Bible that is divided into 365 readings, a portion of the Bible for each day of the year, on every September 11th, everyone that reads this standard 365-day Bible reads the passage in the book of Isaiah, chapter 9, verse 11, which is the judgment warning on ancient Israel, which was a raid on ancient Israel by the world's first recorded terrorists, the ancient Assyrians. And the terrorists on 9/11 were from the same part of the world. The Assyrians raided the northern kingdom of Israel first, and then later the southern kingdom of Judah was destroyed, which is why the terrorists on 9/11 hit the North Tower first, followed 17 minutes later by the South Tower. And this Isaiah 9:11 passage includes a mention of collapsed buildings and uprooted sycamore trees. On the morning after 9/11, Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle gave a speech to the world regarding the events on 9/11. He quoted the passage in Isaiah 9:11, not realizing it was a judgment warning on the ancient Jews. He quoted how, after the raid by the Assyrians, the Hebrews did not repent to God, but instead vowed defiantly to rebuild and become stronger than before. And so, like the ancient Jews, America did not repent after the judgment warning, and instead defied God even more. And so, like ancient Israel, America will now be destroyed. This is why, in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, he frequently pairs together the number 110 and the number 9. Both of these numbers symbolize God's judgment on the nation, and paired together, these numbers point to the big judgment warning that was 9/11. As well, these numbers paired together in God's signs and connections serve as a witness confirmation that the perceived signs and connections are from God. Now, the reason for going into that is because this is connected to with 110 days, as I mentioned. And I also mentioned in the clip earlier that in turn, this connects with 110 days to the Pentecost in 2019, which, by the way, was again the day of the rare earthquake in Jericho, Washington state, next to Columbia River. The name Columbia, God also uses to symbolize America. Because I had known of this date ahead of time, of course, because of the parallel of signs, and when I learned that there was this earthquake in Jericho, Washington state, on the day that was the countdown, the symbolic day of the end of the Joshua parallel of signs, which was essentially a countdown to the day that the symbolic day that the walls of security fell on Jericho, I had to go for a long walk. And in the story in the book of Joshua, the walls of security would have collapsed in judgment on Jericho due to an earthquake. Archaeology in Jericho supports this. So, and also it was 110 days that connected to that, which again symbolizes Joshua. That earthquake was also connected to with 110 weeks exactly to the day that the walls fell in the Hanford nuclear site, which is just downriver from Jericho, Washington on the Columbia River. That was the day that the walls fell on rail cars carrying plutonium, causing total evacuation, emergency evacuation of the Hanford nuclear site. And the Hanford nuclear site no longer processes uranium. What's going on there is a massive cleanup. And the Hanford nuclear site is known for having processed in its time 110,000 tons of fuel from the reactors. And so they're cleaning up the 110,000 tons of fuel. And that earthquake, the 3.2 earthquake in Jericho, Washington state on Pentecost in 2019 was also exactly 110 months after the 100-foot wall fell in Mount Vernon, the city of Mount Vernon High School in Mount Vernon, New York. So that was amazing too, because again, it was the Mount Vernon retaining wall in Washington's Mount Vernon estate that collapsed, which was a major prophetic sign. All right, so 110 pairs with the number 9, and this day that the wall of security collapsed in Jerusalem due to heavy rains was exactly 9 years after the 8.8 magnitude earthquake in Concepcion, Chile. Concepcion is Spanish for conception, which is symbolism for the birth pains of the end times, and also the birth of the child, which in Revelation chapter 12, which symbolizes the church being birthed into heaven. And it was an 8.8 magnitude earthquake because God pairs the numbers 9 and 88 together. 88 is another number that symbolizes 9/11 because it was the heroes of the 88th floor. The Tribute in Light art installation was made up of 88 searchlights. And according to Wikipedia, there are 88 places in America named Washington. And through the 9/11 events, God pointed to George Washington. And also, the number 88 symbolizes 88 miles per hour, the most iconic scene in the movie Back to the Future, which is a movie God used as a judgment prophetic warning of 9/11, which is explained in another video. But the 88 miles per hour scene is when Doc jumps up and down and screams 88 miles per hour after the DeLorean first time travels, and the out-of-time license plate spins on the ground in between the two columns of fire, which symbolize the two towers on 9/11 on fire. Out of time symbolizes America being out of time to repent. And so anyway, that's why 9 and 88. So from the 8.8 magnitude Concepcion, Chile earthquake, it is exactly 9 years to this date, which also connects with 110 days. Okay, so this date here is up here. February 27th, 2019 is right here. So this, in other words, this diagram continues right here. Now, if we go back 4 months, we get this day here, which was game 4 of the extremely prophetic 2018 World Series, which is explained in other videos. But this day was expected ahead of time to involve a prophetic sign involving the number 4. And sure enough, that's what it was. The story of the game was how Dodgers pitcher, player number 44, was prematurely pulled too early from the game, thus blowing the 4-0 lead of the Dodgers. 4-0 hints at the number 40, and this was exactly 40 weeks after the Humanity Star sign, which was the launch of this satellite named Humanity Star by the company Rocket Lab. And it was a promotion for their company, but it was supposed to glitter in the night sky, and it was supposed to be this, it was humanism philosophy behind it, long story short, which was Antichrist symbolism. And what it symbolized was the birth of the Antichrist. It was the Antichrist Star of Bethlehem, and it connected with 40 weeks, which symbolizes the birth pains of the end times, as I just said, average human gestation period. Oh, and the Humanity Star was supposed to be in orbit for 9 months, which is the average human gestation period, before it would deorbit and crash to Earth, which symbolized Satan falling like lightning from heaven, which is what Jesus said he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven, and the dragon in Revelation chapter 12, which the archangel Michael throws down from heaven to earth. That was what the Humanity Star returning to Earth symbolized. Well, 40 weeks after this was this day that the 4-0 blown lead was blown. Also, another reason why I knew of this day ahead of time was that it was this game 4 was exactly 444 days after the Revelation 12 sign in 2017, which depicted a birth. The rapture sign depicted a birth. Okay, on this day, it was the synagogue shooting in Squirrel Hill. All the media stories, though, mentioned how it was the wealthy, rich neighborhood of Pittsburgh, Squirrel Hill, the synagogue shooting, and 4 police officers were wounded. And this was on the same day as this pitcher 44 was removed from the game too early, and his name is Rich Hill. So the story of the game was about Rich Hill, and it was on the same day as the Rich Squirrel Hill neighborhood synagogue shooting. Also, what confirmed, by the way, the significance of this, it was the story, but just to confirm it for you, in archaic English, the word Trump means trumpet or the sounding of a trumpet, and President Trump, is God's trumpet that he uses to trumpet and highlight his signs. That's why his vice president is named Pence, because Trump-Pence hints at trumpets. Anyway, he tweeted his disapproval to the manager of removing this pitcher too early, and he also mentioned the pitcher and the 4-0 blown lead. And so that was a trumpeting of the prophetic sign. The philosophy behind it was secular humanism, etc. Again, we have the 4 police officers wounded in the Jewish synagogue, and this was the day of Game 4 of the World Series, in which the story was about player number 44 and how the 4-0 lead was blown, which hinted at 40, and it was 40 weeks after the Antichrist Star of Bethlehem, the Humanity Star, and 40 weeks is the average human gestation period. And this Game 4 and player number 44 and the 4 police officers wounded was 444 days after the Revelation 12 sign was fulfilled in the night sky, which depicted a birth. And all of this, player number 44 and the 4 police officers wounded on the day of Game 4, is exactly 44 months before June 27th, 2022. The date is predicted that Israel will bomb Iran. And this event, Israel bombing Iran, will ultimately lead to the rise of the Antichrist, the 44th president. Anyway, all of these 4s, the reason for going into that on this Game 4 is confirmation of this 4 months to the day of the security wall collapsing. And of course, this was a synagogue, so this was Jewish Israel symbolism too. In the synagogue shooting, it was 11 deaths, which confirms this 11 months right here. So in other words, from the synagogue shooting, 4 police officers wounded and 11 deaths is why we add 4 months and 11 months to this date. And it's amazing because from that we get the security wall of Jerusalem collapsing due to heavy rains, which in turn connects with 7 months, which symbolizes 7 years. And in Bible prophecy, 7 years symbolizes the end times period. But it is only symbolic, and that's explained in other videos. The time times and a half time isn't a riddle or a puzzle to be revealing 3.5 years. It's the other way around. 3.5 years is symbolism for tribulation. And a tribulation, even for an individual, is symbolized by a period of tribulation followed by a doubling or an increasing of that tribulation, followed by a period of easing of that tribulation. In the Endurance Shackleton story, the most extreme epic in history story of survival and endurance, the ship was named Endurance. It was discovered in March 2022 here, and it was symbolism for the endurance and patience of the saints during the end times period and persecution from the Antichrist. And the disembarkment of the ship before it sank on the ice floe, the crew set up what they called Patience Camp. The first leg of their journey was on the ice floe, which symbolized the time. Then, from the ice floe and their experiences on the ice floe, followed the sea journey to Elephant Island, which was a crazy, intense journey. Half of the crew was left behind on Elephant Island, and 6 men continued on for another sea journey, which was even more severe and challenging, through the South Atlantic Antarctica Ocean to South Georgia Island. So a second journey, which symbolized the times in the times and a half time. Then 3 people were left on the shore of South Georgia Island, and the other 3 crossed over South Georgia Island, the uncharted island, through a mountain range. And that story is just in itself a complete other story of severe endurance and tribulation. But that journey took 3.5 days. And so that was symbolism for the time and a half time, because that journey wasn't as arduous, arguably, as the sea journeys and the ice floe journey. And then they made it to the whaling town on the other side of the island. So times and a half time. Anyway, I say all of that because a lot of prophecy students will be raising their eyebrows. What is he talking about? The period of tribulation, the end times is 7 years, or if anything, it's 3.5 years. Well, no, the second coming is in 2024. The reason for God giving me a voice through this prediction is to prove this, because God's true big picture of signs and patterns and connections is an interconnected web, and the main conclusions are inextricably tied to each other. They are all, in fact, one and the same conclusion. This is how the picture works. It's impossible to separate the conclusions. And the main conclusion is, of course, the date of the second coming, which is the Day of Atonement in 2024. And so when this prediction comes to pass, it will prove what I'm saying. The tribulation will be 2 years long, and it will begin this September. Anyway, that's why the 7 months. Well, 4 months and 7 months is 11 months, which is confirmed by the 11 deaths, but also from the Bible, 11 months, the number 11 symbolizes the execution of judgment. And that gets us to this date, which was 9/27 in 2019. Now, the date 9/27 is relevant in itself because this points and symbolizes Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, the last verse in the central prophecy in the Bible, and which regards the end times period and the rule of the Antichrist, this final set of 7, the 7 years, which is why in confirmation of that is the 7 months connection. It's just amazing. Again, though, the 7 years is symbolic. And also, 9/27 is relevant here because the rapture will be on September 26th, 2022, the Feast of Pentecost, and the day after will be 9/27, the beginning of the tribulation period, the symbolic 7 years, but it's just symbolism once again. Anyway, this was the day that the artist that painted Barack Obama's controversial presidential painting, which is a massive prophetic sign in itself. There have been no presidential paintings hung up in the White House since George W. Bush. That's George W. And that's because it's all pointing to the painting of George Washington, which is another George W., that was taken out of the White House in an emergency when the White House and Capitol building were burned to the ground in 1813 after the British first landed in Washington's Mount Vernon estate. And 188 years later was the only other time a foreign power enemy invaded Washington, and that was on 9/11 in 2001. The British landed in Washington's Mount Vernon estate on 9/11 in 1813. and 188 because God uses the number 188 to symbolize H188, the 188th word in Strong's Hebrew Concordance, which is the word for woe, exclamation mark, used in judgment context. All right, now this painting was painted by this artist that also made this statue of this African-American Rastafarian wearing ripped jeans and riding a horse, and it was called Rumors of War. Regarding the end times period and the Antichrist, Jesus said in the Olivet Discourse that there would be rumors of war. Obviously, this sign, this Rumors of War statue sign, is extremely relevant and was made for primarily this sign right here, or this event when Israel will nuke Iran. In other words, this trail of signs that are centered around, if you will, this Rumors of War statue is pointing to the act of war when Israel will nuke Iran. But this is tying into, first of all, God is using horse signs to point to Barack Obama, including, for example, American Pharaoh. Pharaoh is a type or a symbolism for the Antichrist in the Bible, and that's why American Pharaoh, the first horse to win the Triple Crown in 444 months, which is hinting at the 44th president, American Antichrist, American Pharaoh. Anyway, so that's why he's riding a horse, but it's also a Civil War sign, because this statue was ultimately destined for Richmond, Virginia, and next to the other horse Confederate statues, and it was like this kind of protest, if you will, which is all leading into the Black Lives Matter, Antichrist protests, etc. This particular sign, it's a Civil War sign, and we are in a civil war, and the Civil War will continue into the persecution of God's people, Christians. In that net, though, will come other people as well, including other conservatives that aren't Christian. But it's all spiritual, and it's directed at Christians because it's all about the mark of the Antichrist, which is the VACCINE, which is not a supposed precursor to the mark of the Antichrist, and a testing of faith to those that refused to take it. Anyway, this was the statue is named Rumors of War on 927, which is hinting at Daniel 927 and the end times Antichrist period. This statue was unveiled on this day in Manhattan in Times Square, which is also extremely prophetic because God's using Times Square in his prophetic signs. And I believe it's the location of where there will be a dirty bomb explosion on Barack Obama's birthday, August 4th, 2022. That's a prediction based on what is currently known regarding God's big picture of signs. Well, anyway, this sign here connected with exactly 110 weeks to this day here, which was also known in advance because of God's big picture of signs. It was the date 11/4, which hints at 11 times 4 equals 44. And it was the day of the 99th anniversary of the discovery of King Tut's tomb, which is one of the reasons why I knew of this date ahead of time. King Tut being the Pharaoh of Egypt, which is Antichrist symbolism, and the number 9 being the most important number symbolizing judgment from the Bible. That's why the 99th anniversary, but it was also the 13th anniversary of the election of Barack Obama on the date 11/4 in 2008. And from the Bible, the number 13 symbolizes the Antichrist. Nimrod, a type for the Antichrist, was a type for the Antichrist, and he was the 13th generation from Ham. Haman, another type for the Antichrist, persecuted the Jews on the 2 13th days of the months. And the two Antichrists are described in the book of Revelation in chapter 13. God pairs the numbers 9 and 13 together because 9 symbolizes judgment, 13 Antichrist. So 9 times 13 symbolizes judgment from the Antichrist on the nation, and 9 times 13 equals 117, and the Antichrist will come to power and become president again during the 117th Congress, which began on January 4th, 2021. Exactly 9 months and 13 days back from this prophetic day here was the day that Hank Aaron, player number 44, the home run king, died. Home run king symbolizes Antichrist king symbolism. 44 connects with this date. 11 times 4 equals 44. And the 44th president it hints at. I knew of that date ahead of time because it was exactly 444 weeks after the Batman Dark Knight Rises movie massacre, which was in turn 42 months after the Dark Knight rose to power, the 44th president's inauguration. 42 months is mentioned 7 times in Bible prophecy as symbolizing the rule of the Antichrist. Well, anyway, Hank Aaron, player number 44, in 4 years of his career, hit a total of 44 home runs. And he tied Babe Ruth, the home run king's home run record, on the date 4-4 in 1974, exactly 44 years before the date 4-4 in 2018, when Thunderbird's jet number 4 in its squad crashed and killed a pilot. And that symbolized how Jesus said he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven, because Barack Obama will come to power again through the death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash. And that's why Thunderbird jets, lightning. Barack Obama's name in Hebrew means lightning from heaven, which is explained in other videos. Anyway, also Hank Aaron beat Babe Ruth's home run record in the 4th inning in a game when he hit the home run off of Dodgers pitcher number 44. Anyway, Hank Aaron died 6 + 6 + 6 days after he took the VACCINE. Hank Aaron's death is the biggest sign of all in God's signs that symbolizes and identifies what the mark of the Antichrist is. 666 is, of course, Antichrist symbolism on Bible prophecy. And the day that he took the VACCINE, 6 + 6 + 6 days before he died, was the first day of the 117th Congress. And this 117th Congress was opened with a ceremonial prayer for the first time in history, prayer to pagan gods and not the God of the Bible. Anyway, that's why 9 months and 13 days connects from the death of Hank Aaron, the home run king, player number 44, to this day, the 99th anniversary of King Tut and the 13th anniversary of the 44th president. This was also the day that Joe Biden announced the details of his mandate for the VACCINE and 84 million workers. Now, the headlines of all of the stories included 84 million workers. The reason for 84 is because it's another number that reveals the identity of the Antichrist, who was born on the date 8-4, August 4th, which is the 216th day in the calendar year, and 216 is 6 times 6 times 6. Also, 7 years in Bible prophecy symbolizes the end times period in the Antichrist's rule, and 7 years is 84 months. Also, this day was the first day that Israel passed a budget in 3.5 years. And 7 times in Bible prophecy, 3.5 years symbolizes the end times period, as I was explaining. And all the headlines read the 3.5 years because that was why it was a news story. It was the first budget passed in 3.5 years. And this makes it relevant in this trail of signs when we're talking about Israel and the day that Israel will nuke Iran. Also, this was the day of the NASA news story regarding the judge's resolution or dismissal of Blue Origin's lawsuit, which challenged NASA's awarding the contract to SpaceX for the lunar module that will be a part of the return to the moon in 2024. NASA's return to the moon in 2024 is a massive prophetic sign communicating the return of Lord Jesus Christ in 2024, because the moon symbolizes Christ. God, the sun, which symbolizes God the Father, is light, is too bright for us to gaze at, but we can gaze at the sun's light reflected off of the moon. Long story short. Anyway, this contract was for $2.9 billion, and this news story regarding the court case was exactly 29 weeks after NASA awarded SpaceX the $2.9 billion contract. 2.9 and 29 hints at the moon because the lunar cycle is 29.5 days. All right. And as explained earlier, the crash of the Bereshit moonlander, the Israeli moonlander on the moon in 2019 was a massive sign communicating the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ in 2024. And speaking of this 29 weeks exact connection back from the day that the lawsuit was settled between Blue Origin and NASA to the day that SpaceX was awarded the contract of $2.9 billion from NASA, the day that SpaceX was awarded this contract was April 16th, 2021. And this was also the day of the first flag raising at the new World War I national monument in Washington, D.C. This is highly symbolic because of the other signs that God has used involving World War I. But in a nutshell, if it's possible, I don't think so, but in a nutshell, World War I is the rumors of wars that Jesus was speaking about in the Olivet Discourse in Matthew 24, when nation will rise up against nation and kingdom against kingdom, as he said, the beginning of the birth pains, the beginning of the end times period. A symbolic one, because World War I led to the British beating the Ottoman Turk Empire and then ruling the Palestine territory in their Palestine mandate given to them by the League of Nations, which led the way to, for example, the Balfour Declaration, which allowed Jews to immigrate back to Israel, and on in terms of the signs. So I won't get into that. But also World War I is symbolizing the world and judgment on the world, and Lord Jesus Christ coming back at the end of judgment on the world to defeat the Antichrist, for example, in Jerusalem. And so that's why in World War I, it was 4.7 million Americans that were in uniform and 117,000 deaths, which is astounding because the 47th president and Antichrist will come to power during the 117th Congress. And that's also why God is pointing back to this World War I monument, which is a monument to those that died and fought in World War I. 4.7 million in uniform, which hints at 47 and 117,000 deaths, which reveals the identity of the Antichrist that will briefly rule the world. All right, now this video is about Iran, and the signs that I have just explained that occurred on November 4th, 2021, is part of the trail of signs that is leading to the day that Israel will bomb, probably with nuclear bombs, Iran's nuclear facilities. So we are talking about Iran. And that is why it is absolutely astounding that on this prophetic date here, with these signs that, for example, also include very prophetic signs involving Israel. It was the 3.5 years, for example, first budget, which tied into these other Israel signs, as I just explained. Well, this is amazing because this date here, 11/4/2021, wasn't only the 99th anniversary of King Tut's tomb being discovered in the Valley of Kings, and also the 13th anniversary of the election of the Antichrist king in 2008. But it was also the 42nd anniversary of the hostage taking at the U.S. Embassy in Iran. Now, first of all, the number 42 is Antichrist symbolism from the Bible. 7 times in Bible prophecy, it is said that the Antichrist will rule for a symbolic 42 months. For example, God uses the number 42 in his signs as Antichrist symbolism. And as has been explained here, we have a ton of Antichrist symbolism that is occurring in the signs on 11/4/2021. Not to mention the mark of the Antichrist, for example, with the 84 million workers that would be affected by the mandate, and again, the 13th anniversary and the 99th anniversary, right? All right, now 42 months is 3.5 years. And that's why it's also astounding and amazing confirmation for the relevance of this 42nd anniversary, because on this 11/4 date, we have Israel and this first budget that was passed in, the first one passed in 3.5 years, 3.5 years. And 3.5 years, biblical years, is 42 months. A biblical year is a 30-day month. And this is astounding. Well, either way, 3.5 years is 42 months. And so we are talking about the Antichrist as well and his rule for 42 months. But in this video specifically, we are talking about Israel and Iran. And so, in other words, 42 years back from the first Israeli budget in 3.5 years is the Iranian hostage taking at the U.S. Embassy. Now, I'm definitely not old enough to remember this. This happened in 1979. I was an infant, a kid. And so, but reading up about it and learning about it, it's very, very important in history, especially Iranian history. This was a pivotal moment in Iranian history. And there wouldn't be, for example, this need to bomb Iran's nuclear facilities had it not been for this date, 11/4 in 1979. Okay, so just briefly, the students organized a protest at the U.S. Embassy. They had planned to storm the embassy just for a few hours. This was the original plan, to get attention. The goal, they were supporters of the religious leader, the Ayatollah Khomeini, and they saw that as an opportunity to give him support. They didn't actually tell him that they were going to do it, but they figured that he would support it once it had happened. And sure enough, they were right. Khomeini wouldn't have supported it beforehand, though, but after seeing the success of the event and the success of the popularity of it in the Iranian population, he was all in. Well, anyway, he wasn't the leader of the nation at that time. There was moderates that were leading the country at the time. And furthermore, there was also a sizable leftist, Marxist, communist faction in Iran as well, which was competing with the extreme religious faction. So you had all these competing factions with each other in Iran, but because of this U.S. hostage taking, the religious leaders ended up winning this whole competition. And right after that, they passed their Islamic constitution, etc. The rest is history, in other words. All right, now, this Iranian hostage taking was also extremely important in American history. It led to, for example, the landslide victory of President Ronald Reagan in 1980, for example. And I won't get into too much details for the sake of time, but the hostage taking is sometimes known as the 444 days hostage take crisis. In other words, that's a nickname for it. It's not just called the Iranian hostage crisis. It's also sometimes referred to as the 444-day hostage crisis. That's very interesting because the Antichrist is the 44th president. And we are talking about this 42 years connection to the date 11/4 in 2021, which, as I just explained, is filled with Antichrist symbolism, and for that matter, is the 13th anniversary of the election of the 44th president. So that's absolutely astounding. The 444-day hostage taking. And it's known by that partly because of the timing that it ended. It ended precisely minutes after Ronald Reagan was inaugurated. And so that's why it's remembered, the actual timing of the amount of days, one of the reasons. Of course, it's remembered because also it just went on for so long, and it was a disaster for the U.S. And I guess also probably it's known as 444 days because it rhymes, to those that don't know prophecy, and also the 44th president is the Antichrist. But also it symbolizes, or it indicates, a spirit of Antichrist in Iran, which we can see from the history onward after 1979 regarding Iran. It's definitely an evil, there's definitely an evil spirit over this nation and the leadership of this nation. And so, of course, Islam is the spiritual enemy of Christianity. when we look at it correctly, it's clear and obvious that Islam was designed by Satan to counter Christianity. I mean, the whole religion is obsessed with how Jesus was just a prophet, for example, and on and on. I'm not going to get into an apologetics regarding Islam here, which I could. I find the subject interesting, of course. But also, we're talking about Iran, which is located where ancient Persia was, and that's very significant regarding the Bible, because, for example, the number 13 is Antichrist symbolism, because Haman, who was a type for the Antichrist, who was in ancient Persia, as recorded in the book of Esther in the Bible, persecuted the Jews in ancient Persia on the 2 13th days of the calendar months. Which is why it is amazing beyond words that exactly 42 years after this hostage taking, the 444 days hostage taking, was the 13th anniversary of the election of the 44th president. Absolutely stunning. And that's why it's amazing that after the hostage taking, after it began on the date 11/4 in 1979, 4 times 4 days later, 13 hostages were released. This was a big event in the whole crisis, how the 13 hostages were released at the beginning of the hostage taking. This was a major thing. But it was 13, and we are talking about Iran, which is Persia, and the number 13 is associated with Persia and persecution, and of course, the hostages were persecuted. They were tortured and treated very badly throughout the hostage crisis. And that's why that's astounding. And it was also 4 times 4 days after it began on the date 11/4, which hints at 11 times 4 equals 44. And the hostage crisis was for 444 days. It was also an initial 66 hostages, which is also Antichrist symbolism. The number 666 is associated with the Antichrist in Bible prophecy, and this Antichrist and the number 666 are described in the 66th book of the Bible. And so anyway, this is extremely important, this connection of 42 years to the first budget passed in Israel in 3.5 years. Again, 42 months is 3.5 years. And that's why, again, this date here that I've spent so much time explaining with the signs that occurred on it is extremely relevant in this trail of signs that is leading to the day that Israel will nuke Iran. Now, as I explained, God pairs the numbers 9 and 110 together, which is making, and that's how his sign works on second witness signs confirming the matter. And that's why after the 110 weeks connection, it is exactly 9 weeks connected to this date here, which was January 5th and the day of the fire in Philadelphia on 23rd Street. And that's confirmation of the 9 weeks connection as well, because again, God pairs the numbers 9 and 23 together. Okay, and also, as explained in other videos, this sign is very prophetic because it was a news story because it killed 12 people. The number 12 symbolizes the church. 8 of them were children, unfortunately, and they were all in the same family. So it was a national news story. And this fire occurred right near the Rocky statue, near the steps of the museum, which is where the iconic scene in the movie Rocky takes place. And Rocky is the most famous sports movie in all of history. And the movie Rocky is rapture symbolism. The main theme song of the movie is "They're Gonna Fly Now," which symbolizes the rapture, and it symbolizes victory, etc. And also Philadelphia, the Church of Philadelphia is the only church that Jesus wrote letters to that he said would be raptured, spared the tribulation period. And Rocky symbolizes rock, which symbolizes Jesus. Okay. Also on this day, the stock market peaked. Today, as of today, the stock market is still well below its peak that it made on January 5th. And the Dow peaked, the top tick was 36,952. When we subtract 36,952 days back from this date, we get the day of this capsized steamer in 1920 in the Philippines on the date 11/4, which confirms the connection to this date 11/4, by the way. Now, the reason why the Philippines is relevant is because in 1920, the Philippines was U.S. territory. And God is focused on America. Some say, well, why are you always focused on America signs? Well, the reason is because God is America-centric. There are only two nations in history that were founded not on geography or ethnicity or language, but a relationship with God, Israel and America. America is God's Gentile nation, and that's why the judgment warning signs for America. Anyway, in this ship that collapsed, 44 people died. Some of them were drowned, but most of them were eaten by sharks. And it is very creative and amazing that God would use shark symbolism in his Antichrist symbolism signs, which of course hints at the Antichrist 44th president shark. And that's confirmed with this 4 times 4 weeks exactly to the day that Israel will nuke Iran, which will set a series of events in motion, which will ultimately bring in the Antichrist, promising peace and security, and extending NATO to all nations on earth, for example. The new world order of collective security, which is why military alliances with other nations is tantamount to rebellion against God in the Bible. It is signaling not trusting in God, for example. We are not to be making these permanent military alliances with other nations. In fact, for that matter, there should not be a standing army. The founders of the country knew this. The only way to protect a nation is for every citizen to be armed with the latest technology and military technology and trained in it. Standing armies also can be used by tyrants and will be in the next few months to turn against its citizens. And for that matter, there wouldn't be the tyrannical COVID mass psychosis, for example, if there weren't the government and military of the government backing them up. We wouldn't even be in the mess we're in. In other words, if we were just following the template laid down in the Bible, which is when, as it was up until the late 19th century, all people, all citizens of the nations, their responsibility for collective security training. Everyone should be armed. That's the reason for the Second Amendment and why all of the constitutions of the colonies as well, and on back into history, it was actually at times in English history against the law to not be trained in these use of these weapons. So everyone should be trained. Furthermore, had Ukrainians been trained and all been armed before the conflict would have never happened, just for example. So standing armies are a sin as well. And standing armies, for that matter, gets us involved in these other adventurous wars around the world, which have always brought bad things for them. Except for the times when they were justified, like World War II. But anyway, getting back to this, that's the reason for the 4 times 4 weeks is also confirmed with the second witness with the 23rd, because God pairs 23 and 44 together to point to the 44th president that wore jersey number 23 when he played basketball in high school, the basketball president, the 44th president. All right, well, I think I've finished it all here. I think I've explained everything. One more thing to add is that the Russians, the communists, the international communists during the Cold War, they knew they could never take over America because America was armed. America has a lot of weapons in the hands of citizens. It is the thing that's preventing something like the Russian takeover of America. But right now, the new version of the international globalists the communists are the globalists that are seeking to have a one world government, a new world order of a government, and NATO extended to all nations, for example. In other words, Antichrist. And the thing that is in their way is America. It's always been the case that America has been standing in the way of this utopia dream of the globalists to have a one world government. And what stands in the way in America are conservatives, and specifically those that are armed. In other words, the biggest thing that is preventing the New World Order from happening right now are the guns in America. And so it is the primary objective, the number one objective of the international globalists is to remove the guns of Americans. And that needs to happen for them to be able to bring in their utopia, New World Order, global government, and so very soon Americans will be disarmed. In the most important video on this channel, which is titled God's Purpose for These Predictions, I will explain the reason for why God has given me a voice through this prediction that is from God. You are making a very grave and serious error if you think you already know how I was able to know this prediction. And more importantly, if you think you already know why I was able to know this prediction. It would be very foolish for you to skip watching this most important video. You will have missed the point of this prediction. One of the purposes for this prediction is to establish that the main conclusions being stated in this video are fact. That is the purpose for this prediction. Therefore, there is no debate regarding the information that I will be presenting. If there were to continue to be a debate on the information I will be presenting, there is no purpose for the prediction. In other words, the information is controversial, but that is the reason for the prediction, to end the controversy. It is a serious warning for those that disagree with the things being stated in this video. And to not appreciate this is to miss entirely the point of this prediction that is from God, and it is to miss the point of this video and video channel. This is how prophecy works. This is how God proves things. This is why 1/3 of the Bible is prophecy, in order to prove that it is the Word of God. Jesus said to those that doubted him, if they didn't believe what he had said, then they should believe the works. They should believe the healings and miracles that Jesus did. In the description box below, I will leave a link to the video titled God's Purpose for These Predictions. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Please leave a like and upvote the video. And once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, TrumpPrediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the Odyssey.com or Rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.